Thank you very much for the question and the clarification on the stage. So, there are a number of drugs that are available in Canada, including capmatinib and tepotinib. And we're also able to get compassionate access for crizotinib as well for exon 14 skipping mutation for MET. I believe that's the target that we're talking about. So all of these are available, but here is the bigger problem in Canada. Approval for a drug does not mean the same thing as having the drug publicly funded. So capmatinib and then tepotinib are not publicly funded in Canada. Tepotinib is actually funded in one province, which is Quebec, our French-speaking province, but nowhere else. So the patient would have to purchase their own drug because our drug costs are often quite similar to that of the United States. Many patients cannot afford to pay for it themselves. And many oncologists are not used to asking their patients to pay for it. So what I'm not clear about is whether the oncologist didn't know about the access to these drugs because there's no public reimbursement, or whether the patient couldn't afford the drug and therefore could not get access. Having said that, if any patients in Canada has a exon skipping 14 mutation, and they contacted my hospital, we have a special connection with Pfizer, who makes crizotinib, and we have been able to get that drug at least to any patients that have required it in Canada. So I do not know whether this is a lack of education on the medical oncology side or a lack of resources on the patient side to pay for the medication.
Okay, so Professor Liu, you mean that Pfizer company will give the compassionate use of crizotinib, right?
Pfizer does not want to make a habit of giving all their drugs out for free. So they have made a special deal with my hospital that any patients that come to our hospital, that travel to our hospital, will be able to get access. But obviously, they do not want to basically give drug out free to absolutely everybody in Canada. So any patients that are able to come to our institution, we're able to request for and get approval for that drug. Our biggest challenge is the fact that we have no, other than Quebec and tepotinib, there's no public funding for any of the c-MET exon 14 drugs. And that is partly because there are no randomized trials showing direct benefit.
Oh, okay. So, if the price for the MET 14 skipping mutation, the price for the drug is the same as US, right?
It's very similar to the United States. So it is practically impossible for most patients to actually afford if they have to pay for it themselves. It's very unfortunate.
And I have one more question. So the drug is covered by the insurance or not?
It can be covered by insurance, but many insurance companies will say that if the government will not pay for it, they will not pay for it either. At the beginning, I think because the types of side effects and adverse events that patients can get with lorlatinib seemed different than with other drugs, there has been a lot of fear as to what to do under these circumstances. But over time, I think that we're managing these side effects actually better and better, and we're learning that what used to scare us before no longer scares us. Hyperlipidemia is basically something that We just need to monitor carefully, particularly in the first 6 months. If it's going to be a problem, it will appear very early, oftentimes within a month or so. The second thing to realize is that hyperlipidemia, is something that we do not need to panic about. And that we just need to remember that we need to start with certain drugs that do not have problems with the CYP3A4, 3A5 metabolism. So drugs such as rosuvastatin or pravastatin are particularly safe. The second thing to keep in mind is that once you start them on one of a statin, if you still continue to run into problems, adding another drug called ezetimibe, which comes as a flat 10 milligram dose, is exceedingly safe. So a long time ago, I had forgotten how to manage high cholesterol and lipidemia because I was just doing only cancer treatment. But now with immune therapies, I've had to learn how to deal with, endocrinopathies, and autoimmune diseases. And now there's so many things that I'm more comfortable dealing with. So at this point, I think that hyperlipidemia is one of the easiest side effects to actually deal with for our patients. There's a standardized way in which we start drugs and we monitor it. Rarely do you have to stop the drug. Our rosuvastatin costs in Canada, these drugs are generic. They're also very cheap as well. And they are, in many cases, covered by our public health system. So, again, we're not too worried about this. Interestingly enough, the original fears of everyone losing cognitive function or having mood swings really isn't something that has been a big problem for most of our patients. Our biggest thing that we worry about now for our patients is actually weight gain. That's probably the harder side effect to manage than hyperlipidemia or even neuropathy, because we're used to dealing with it for many of our drugs, peripheral edema, or even central nervous system side effects. So I think over time we're learning to be much more comfortable with the side effects of many of these drugs. And I think some of the newer drugs in EGFR and in ROS1 and in other areas in lung cancer are also having a lot of unusual side effects that we're just learning how to deal with.